In the shadows of human interaction, there exists a fundamental truth that most will never acknowledge. The person who reveals their intentions becomes immediately vulnerable. They expose their desires, their objectives, their very strategy for moving through the world. This exposure creates weakness, a tactical disadvantage in the silent war of human relations that unfolds daily across boardrooms, bedrooms, and digital battlefields. Those who speak openly of their plans invite resistance, whether conscious or unconscious. They position themselves as readable targets in a world where being predictable is perhaps the gravest strategic error one can make. Power operates in silence. It moves without announcement, without declaration. The most effective wielders of influence understand that transparency serves only those who have nothing to gain, nothing to protect. History's most formidable strategists, from military generals to business titans to political mastermind invariably embrace the art of opacity. They have recognized that clear intentions function as a beacon, drawing both allies and enemies toward their position, illuminating their vulnerabilities for all to see. The mass of humanity craves clarity, certainty, and openness. They have been conditioned to believe that honesty requires complete revelation, that integrity demands one wear their ambitions openly. This widespread belief creates precisely the environment in which strategic minds thrive. Consider the naive executive who proudly announces his plan to acquire competing businesses, only to watch acquisition costs mysteriously rise. Observe the politician who telegraphs her legislative priorities, only to find opposition already entrenched before negotiations begin. Witness the negotiator who reveals his bottom line early, surrendering all leverage in a single moment of misguided openness. These are not merely tactical errors, they represent fundamental misunderstandings of how power operates in human systems. The world rewards those who maintain their mystique, who keep others guessing, who create a vacuum of information that others desperately attempt to fill with their own projections and assumptions. Concealment is not deception, though the unsophisticated often conflate the two. Concealment is the preservation of strategic advantage. It is the recognition that information itself is perhaps the most valuable currency in human affairs. Those who distribute this currency freely devalue their own position. They surrender their greatest asset without securing anything of equal value in return. Yet society continues to lionize transparency, celebrating those who speak their truth, while subtly undermining their own strategic position. This cultural worship of revelation creates the perfect environment for those who understand the power of the unsaid, the unwritten, the merely implied. The masses clamor for honesty, while the strategist operates within the spaces between words, within the realm of the unspoken. The figure who perhaps best understood this fundamental principle of power was Niccolò Machiavelli, the Florentine diplomat and political theorist whose name has become synonymous with cunning and strategic manipulation. Born in 1469 to a family of modest means but respectable lineage, Machiavelli rose through the ranks of the Florentine Republic, serving as a diplomat and witnessing firsthand the intricate power games that defined Renaissance Italian politics. His experiences negotiating with figures like Cesare Borgia and Pope Julius II provided him with an unfiltered view of power as it truly operates, not as philosophers and moralists wished it would. After the Medici family reclaimed control of Florence in 1512, Machiavelli found himself imprisoned, tortured, and eventually exiled to his country estate. It was there, removed from the corridors of power he once traversed, that he penned his masterwork, The Prince. While many know Machiavelli for his apparent endorsement of ruthlessness, few truly understand the depths of his strategic vision. Never reveal your intentions stands as perhaps his most elegant and universally applicable principle. This is not merely advice for politicians or military commanders. It is a fundamental law of strategic interaction that applies across all domains of human endeavor. Machiavelli understood that human systems operate according to predictable patterns of psychology and behavior. Those who master these patterns gain an insurmountable advantage over those who remain ignorant of them or, worse, deny their existence out of some misplaced moral squeamishness. For Machiavelli, power was neither good nor evil, it simply was. It existed as a natural force within human relations, much like gravity exists in the physical world. To deny its reality was not virtuous but foolish. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes that a leader must appear to possess the virtues that the public admires, but must be willing to act against those virtues, when necessary, for the preservation of the state. This two-faced approach, maintaining an appropriate public image while operating according to the necessities of power behind closed doors, represents the essence of his counsel on intention. The wise prince keeps his true objectives shrouded, revealing only those aspects that serve his strategy. He presents to the world a carefully constructed facade that elicits the precise reactions he requires from others to advance his position. The masses must believe they understand his motives, while in reality, they perceive only what he wishes them to see. This is not mere deception, it is strategic communication of the highest order. The contemporary mind recoils at such counsel. Modern society has elevated transparency to a virtue approaching religious significance. Corporations publish mission statements and values. Politicians campaign on platforms and promises. Individuals share their innermost thoughts on social media platforms for all to consume. Yet beneath this veneer of openness, those who truly wield power continue to operate according to Machiavellian principles. They understand that revealing their genuine intentions creates resistance, opposition, and unnecessary obstacles. They recognize that human psychology is fundamentally reactive, that people instinctively oppose that which is clearly stated but can be led to embrace the very same outcome when they believe they have discovered or chosen it themselves. The skilled strategist does not announce their destination, but rather creates conditions that make others believe they have independently chosen the path the strategist had selected all along. Machiavelli's insight runs counter to contemporary psychological theories that emphasize authenticity and transparency as paths to fulfillment and success. Yet his perspective is not without modern empirical support. Game theory, evolutionary psychology, and behavioral economics all point to the strategic advantages of concealed intentions in competitive environments. When resources are limited, when opposition exists, when multiple parties pursue conflicting objectives. In other words, in the real world rather than idealized theoretical constructs, the individual who telegraphs their moves operates at a systematic disadvantage. This is not cynicism but realism. It is the recognition that human interaction contains elements of both cooperation and competition, and that the latter requires strategic opacity to navigate successfully. The comfortable illusion that most carry through life is that human interaction operates primarily on principles of mutual benefit, honesty, and straightforward communication. This belief persists because it is comforting, not because it is accurate. The harsh reality is that every interaction contains elements of competition, calculation, and strategic maneuvering. From the job interview where candidates carefully curate their weaknesses to appear as strengths, to the romantic pursuit where interest is strategically concealed to maintain positional advantage, to the business negotiation where bottom lines remain guarded. Secret humans naturally withhold their true intentions when stakes exist. What separates the masterful strategist from the average participant is not whether they engage in this concealment, but how deliberately and effectively they deploy it. Consider the phenomenon of salary negotiations. The employer never reveals their maximum offer, just as the candidate never reveals their minimum acceptable figure. Both parties understand this tacit agreement to conceal true intentions, yet many fail to apply this same strategic thinking to other domains of life. They reserve their strategic capacity for specific contexts deemed competitive, while naively operating with transparency in equally competitive situations merely disguised as cooperative. The illusion that transparency serves one's interests persists precisely because it serves the interests of the strategically minded. Those who benefit from your revelations will consistently encourage you to continue revealing. The masses praise authenticity while the strategist quietly exploits it. What appears as virtue is often strategic weakness. The executive who prides himself on keeping no secrets from his team inevitably finds himself outmaneuvered. The politician who genuinely shares her unfiltered thoughts soon discovers herself without allies. The romantic partner who expresses every desire and insecurity quickly becomes predictable, and in predictability, often less desired. This is not because honesty itself lacks value, but because total transparency eliminates the strategic space necessary for effective navigation of complex human systems. Some level of mystery, of strategic ambiguity, is not merely advantageous but essential for maintaining position and pursuing objectives in a world where interests inevitably conflict. The illusion of the virtuous transparency advocate quickly dissolves when placed under pressure, when resources become scarce, when competition intensifies. Principles often prove to be luxuries of the unchallenged. The true power of concealed intentions lies not in deception but in the maintenance of multiple possible paths forward. When others cannot definitively determine your objectives, they cannot effectively mobilize to obstruct them. They must prepare for multiple scenarios, thus diluting their resources and attention across several possible threats, rather than concentrating them against your actual plan. Furthermore, ambiguity creates space for others to project their own desires onto your actions. They begin to see what they wish to see, interpreting your moves in ways that align with their own hopes or fears. The skilled strategist understands that the human mind abhors uncertainty and will work tirelessly to resolve it, even if that means constructing narratives with minimal evidence. By providing just enough information to activate this psychological tendency while withholding your true aims, you transform others from obstacles into unwitting facilitators of your objectives. The rejection of this strategic reality does not make one virtuous, it makes one vulnerable. Those who insist that human affairs should operate according to idealized models of complete openness are not merely naive. They are providing strategic advantage to those who recognize the game being played beneath the surface of social niceties. Machiavelli's genius lay not in discovering that power operates through concealment. This observation dates back to ancient times, but in his willingness to explicitly acknowledge this reality while others pretended it did not exist or clothed it in elaborate moral justifications. He understood that refusing to see the world as it is represents the greatest strategic liability. The strategist who masters concealed intentions does not become less moral but gains the power to effectively pursue whatever moral ends they deem worthy without telegraphing their moves to those who would oppose them simply for the sake of opposition or advantage. The strategy of concealed intentions operates on multiple levels simultaneously. At its most basic, it prevents direct opposition. When others cannot identify your objective with certainty, they cannot mount an effective defense against it. But the more sophisticated application involves creating false impressions that actively advance your position. This requires a careful calibration of revealed and concealed information, showing enough to shape perceptions while withholding the essential core that would expose your true aim. The master strategist creates an environment where others believe they understand his intentions, while actually perceiving only what he wishes them to see. He constructs a facade that encourages specific reactions which, unbeknownst to others, serve his hidden purpose. The execution of this strategy requires exceptional self-discipline. The natural human impulse is to seek validation by sharing plans and receiving approval or admiration. The ego craves recognition for its cleverness, its foresight, its ambition. Resisting this impulse separates the true strategist from the amateur. Machiavelli observed that those who achieve lasting power possess the ability to delay gratification, to forego the immediate pleasure of revelation for the later reward of successful execution. They understand that the satisfaction of seeing a strategy unfold exactly as planned, with opposition minimized through careful concealment, far outweighs the temporary pleasure of sharing that strategy prematurely. This self-discipline extends beyond mere silence. It encompasses the control of facial expressions, body language, emotional reactions, and seemingly unrelated decisions that might betray the underlying intention to a perceptive observer. Strategic opacity functions most effectively when paired with strategic clarity in other areas. The skilled practitioner of concealed intentions often demonstrates transparent honesty in matters of lesser importance, establishing a reputation for straightforwardness that makes their strategic silences less noticeable. They understand that trust and credibility represent currencies that can be strategically invested. By demonstrating reliability in most interactions, they create a reservoir of goodwill that prevents others from questioning too deeply their occasional ambiguities. They recognize that consistently hidden intentions generate suspicion, while selective concealment, embedded within a broadly trustworthy demeanor, creates the optimal condition for strategic maneuverability. The implementation of this approach requires acute situational awareness. The strategist must constantly assess what others believe about his intentions, how those beliefs influence their behavior, and how that behavior either advances or hinders his concealed objectives. This awareness extends to understanding the secondary and tertiary effects of his actions, not merely how they impact his immediate target, but how they shape the perceptions and responses of all relevant parties within the system. He must maintain a comprehensive mental model of the strategic environment, continuously updated as new information emerges, perpetually refining his understanding of how others perceive him and his actions. This level of awareness demands a psychological distance from one's own ego, allowing for objective analysis of how one is perceived rather than how one wishes to be perceived. Timing plays a crucial role in the strategy of concealed intentions. Revelations, when they occur, must happen at precisely the moment when they can no longer be effectively opposed, or when exposing the plan actually accelerates its completion. The premature revelation of intentions sacrifices advantage, while revelation too long delayed may surrender the benefits that come with being recognized as the architect of a successful strategy. Machiavelli understood that power requires not just successful execution but also attribution. Others must eventually know who is responsible for outcomes, but only when that knowledge serves rather than hinders the strategist's position. The most elegant execution involves creating conditions where, by the time your true intentions become clear, those who might have opposed them have already taken irrevocable steps that commit them to your path. Language itself becomes a strategic tool in concealing intentions. The precise selection of words that maintain maximum ambiguity while appearing to communicate clearly represents an art form mastered by few. This linguistic strategy involves the use of terms with multiple potential interpretations, allowing listeners to project their own meaning while preserving deniability for the speaker. Political leaders often excel at this form of strategic communication, making statements that energize their supporters and neutralize opponents by allowing each to hear what they prefer in the same carefully constructed phrase. Beyond word choice, the strategic use of emphasis, context, timing, and medium all contribute to creating the precise level of opacity required for any given situation. The master communicator reveals exactly as much as necessary to advance his position while concealing that which would generate resistance. In the contemporary landscape, the principle of concealed intentions finds application far beyond the political realms Machiavelli originally addressed. Corporate strategy provides perhaps the most obvious modern parallel. The executive who announces acquisition targets watches those companies' values immediately increase, making the purchases more expensive and less profitable. The company that telegraphs its expansion into new markets finds competitors already entrenched upon arrival. Consider Apple under Steve Jobs, a company legendary for its secretive approach to product development and strategic planning. Jobs understood intuitively what Machiavelli articulated centuries earlier. That advantage belongs to those who maintain the element of surprise, who reveal their creations only when they are fully formed and ready for deployment. This approach generated not just tactical advantage, but an aura of mystique that became integral to the company's brand identity and market power. The digital age has created new battlegrounds for the war of concealed intentions. Social media platforms design their algorithms to extract maximum user engagement, while publicly claiming more benign objectives. Technology companies gather unprecedented amounts of personal data while obscuring the true scope and purpose of their collection behind vague privacy policies and user agreements. Political campaigns micro-target voters with customized messages that remain invisible to the broader public, allowing them to present entirely different faces to different constituencies. In each case, true intentions remain carefully guarded, while public-facing justifications provide convenient cover. Those who master these modern applications of Machiavellian principles often find themselves with insurmountable advantages over competitors who operate with greater transparency. Even in personal relationships, strategic opacity has become increasingly necessary in an era where vulnerability is often exploited rather than honored. Dating applications have transformed romantic pursuit into a strategic game where revealing too much interest too soon typically results in diminished attraction. Career advancement in modern corporate environments requires careful management of one's reputation and the strategic revelation of accomplishments at moments when they will generate maximum advantage. Salary negotiations, performance reviews, and even casual workplace interactions have become arenas where those who master the principle of concealed intentions consistently outperform those who pride themselves on complete transparency. The naive believe they are taking the moral high ground through radical honesty, while the strategic quietly accumulate advantages. Negotiation strategy perhaps best illustrates the timeless nature of Machiavelli's insight. Whether purchasing a car, finalizing a business deal, or engaging in diplomatic relations between nations, the party that more effectively conceals their true position while accurately discerning their counterparts holds the decisive advantage. Professional negotiators understand that revealing one's actual bottom line or walking away point surrenders leverage that can never be reclaimed. They recognize that the most effective negotiation stance involves projecting firm commitment to positions from which they are actually prepared to retreat, creating the appearance of major concessions around factors they consider relatively insignificant. In this domain, the principle of concealed intentions transforms from abstract philosophy to concrete dollars and cents, with measurable consequences for those who master or neglect this fundamental aspect of strategic interaction. The rise of artificial intelligence and algorithmic decision-making adds yet another dimension to this strategic landscape. These systems operate according to objectives and parameters that remain largely hidden from those affected by their decisions. The organizations deploying these technologies maintain strategic advantages precisely because their true criteria for decisions, from credit approvals to content moderation to hiring filters, remain concealed behind proprietary algorithms and incomprehensible neural networks. While publicly emphasizing fairness and objectivity, these systems often pursue more complex and less publicly palatable objectives determined by their creators' concealed intentions. Those who understand this reality approach algorithmic systems with appropriate strategic caution, while those who accept their purported neutrality at face value find themselves systematically disadvantaged in ways they cannot even identify, let alone counter. The conventional narrative surrounding strategic opacity frames it as inherently deceptive or manipulativa, necessary evil at best, and immoral deception at worst. This simplistic moral framing fails to capture the nuanced reality of human interaction. What if concealed intentions represent not a deviation from ethical behavior, but rather a sophisticated understanding of how genuine progress and achievement occur in complex human systems? History suggests that many of humanity's greatest advances emerged from situations where true intentions remained partially veiled until the optimal moment for revelation. The American Founding Fathers deliberately conducted their constitutional convention in secrecy, understanding that the frank exchanges necessary for creating an enduring system of governance required protection from immediate public scrutiny. Lincoln concealed his true position on slavery during critical phases of his political rise, allowing him to eventually reach a position where he could effectively combat it. Even in scientific advancement, Researchers often withhold their most promising hypotheses until they have gathered sufficient evidence, protecting their work from premature criticism or appropriation. Power itself is neither good nor evil. It is a neutral force that can be directed toward virtually any end. The same strategic opacity that enables corruption also facilitates necessary reform in resistant systems. The civil rights leader who reveals every tactical detail of planned protests ensures those protests will be effectively neutralized before they begin. The whistleblower who announces their intentions before securing evidence guarantees that evidence will disappear. The reformer who telegraphs their specific regulatory targets watches those targets marshal their resources for an overwhelming defense. In systems where entrenched interests possess disproportionate power, some degree of strategic ambiguity becomes not just advantageous but necessary for creating meaningful change. The narrative that total transparency always serves the greater good conveniently benefits those who already control the existing power structures and who can most effectively mobilize against clearly identified threats to their position. The strategic concealment of intentions creates space for genuine deliberation and evolution of thought. When people feel compelled to immediately reveal every half-formed idea or tentative plan, they lose the protective incubation period that complex thinking requires. The modern demand for instant position-taking on every emerging issue forces premature commitments that prevent the natural refinement of thought through private consideration and limited trusted exchange. The great philosophical and political thinkers throughout history maintained private journals, engaged in limited confidential correspondence, and tested ideas in controlled settings before subjecting them to broad public consumption. This protected developmental phase allowed for the exploration of controversial positions, the consideration of multiple perspectives, and the identification of flaws without the distorting influence of public perception management. Strategic opacity in the development of ideas serves not deception but intellectual integrity. Furthermore, the concealment of certain intentions can protect legitimate privacy interests that sustain human dignity and autonomy. The unrestrained revelation of every objective, desire, and strategy would create a society of total surveillancia panopticon, where the constant awareness of being observed alters behavior in ways that undermine authentic human development. Privacy, which necessarily includes the private development of intentions, creates essential space for self-determination. It allows individuals to explore possible identities, to consider unconventional approaches, to develop positions independent of social pressure before choosing which elements to subject to public scrutiny. This perspective reframes strategic opacity not as deception but as the preservation of an essential zone of human autonomy, the right to develop intentions without premature external influence or judgment. The most profound reframing recognizes that humans operate simultaneously across multiple games, some collaborative, some competitive, some with aligned incentives, others with opposed interests. Total transparency serves the collaborative dimensions while potentially undermining position in the inevitable competitive aspects of human interaction. The sophisticated ethical actor understands this complexity and calibrates transparency appropriately to each context, rather than applying a simplistic, universal standard across fundamentally different situations. This nuanced approach acknowledges that human systems contain both cooperative and competitive elements, often simultaneously within the same relationship. The parent who conceals the full extent of financial resources from a teenager learning money management is not engaging in immoral deception but in strategic education. The manager who does not reveal the complete range of possible promotion opportunities to an employee still developing essential skills is not being unethically opaque but strategically developmental. Those who master the strategic concealment of intentions eventually discover its most sophisticated application, the ability to operate on multiple planes simultaneously, advancing several objectives through the same actions while obscuring the connections between them. This multi-layered approach transforms even apparent setbacks into disguised advances, creating situations where every outcome serves some aspect of a broader strategy. The true virtuoso reveals different portions of their intentions to different parties, creating a fragmented understanding where no single observer comprehends the complete picture. Each participant believes they understand the strategy based on the fragment they have been allowed to perceive, while remaining unaware of how their piece fits into the larger design. This compartmentalization of knowledge creates a situation where opposition becomes nearly impossible, as no potential adversary possesses sufficient information to effectively counter the full strategy. The rejection of strategic opacity does not elevate one above power games, it merely guarantees defeat within them. Those who insist on complete transparency in environments where others practice concealment effectively disarm themselves in a contest where others remain fully armed. They mistake their strategic disadvantage for moral superiority, failing to recognize that power dynamics persist, regardless of whether one acknowledges or ignores them. The choice is not between playing power games or avoiding them entirely, but between playing them consciously and skillfully, or unconsciously and ineffectively. By refusing to engage with the reality of strategic interaction, the transparency advocate does not transcend power dynamics but merely cedes all advantage to those who understand them better. Their principled stand, while perhaps internally satisfying, consistently produces external defeat when confronting strategic actors who recognize no such self-imposed limitations. This understanding offers a profound liberation from the burdens of unnecessary revelation. The strategic mind recognizes that much of the social pressure toward transparency serves interests other than one's own. The demand to share your thoughts often comes from those who benefit from your revelations while offering none of their own. The insistence on putting all cards on the table typically originates from the party with fewer cards to reveal. Society celebrates the authentic precisely because authenticity creates exploitable vulnerabilities, predictable responses, and manageable personalities. The strategist understands that expectations of revelation are themselves tactical maneuvers, not moral imperatives. This recognition frees one from the guilt and social pressure associated with strategic opacity, replacing them with a clear-eyed assessment of when revelation serves one's objectives and when concealment better advances them. The ultimate power move in strategic interaction involves creating situations where others voluntarily act in ways that advance your concealed objectives while believing they are pursuing their own independent interests. This represents not manipulation but the alignment of incentives through strategic information management. By revealing selective aspects of your intentions while concealing others, you allow others to perceive opportunities that genuinely benefit them, while simultaneously advancing your undisclosed goals. The master strategist creates win-win scenarios, where their most important wins remain invisible. They understand that the strongest position is one where others enthusiastically participate in advancing your agenda without recognizing they are doing so. This approach transforms potential opposition into unwitting collaboration, creating situations where resistance becomes not just unlikely, but structurally impossible. The world belongs to those who recognize its true nature, rather than its idealized portrayal. In human systems defined by limited resources, competing interests, and information asymmetry, the strategic concealment of intentions represents not moral failure, but pragmatic wisdom. It acknowledges the reality that influence flows to those who control information about their objectives, while accurately discerning the objectives of others. This approach does not preclude ethical action or meaningful human connection. It simply recognizes that these exist within competitive environments that reward strategic thinking. The choice to selectively conceal intentions does not determine the morality of those intentions. The same strategic principles can advance objectives ranging from self-preservation to societal transformation. The difference lies not in the strategic method, but in the ultimate aims toward which it is directed. In the eternal shadows of human interaction, power accumulates to those who understand when to remain in darkness and when to step into the light.